Hello there. Good day, good day, good day to you all. And thank you so much for attending our day one of our workshop. We're going to have 3 different segments in our workshop today. So I want to just welcome you to day one. I'm Dr. Michelle Lloyd, a transition success coach with Lloyd Learning Labs here in Texas. And today, what I want to do is I want to talk about just some concerns of mothers and then respond to some of the questions you may have as it pertains to your teens transitioning out of the home. That's exactly what I do. I support mothers with anxiety as it relates to teens transitioning out of the home after high school, whether they're heading off to the college campus, whether they're heading off to the military base or simply residential independence. That's what I do. I do some hand-holding of some mothers, especially if it's your first teen, a son or a daughter who's transitioning out of the home, because that's a whole different feeling. That's a whole different notion when these teens are transitioning off. So just to tell you a little bit more about myself, I am the mother of 3 daughters, India, Iman, and Ivana. And India and Iman, they graduated last year, both of them from college, one in May, the other in December. And of course, Ivana is my freshman in high school. She's my 9th grader. My oldest, of course, India, who now lives in Colorado. And my 2 younger daughters live here, and then I am married to the boo of my youth, and his name is Earl. And I am just so excited again to be able to, just meet you all. I know we had about 4 or 5 additional mothers who are a part of our Emerging Mothers private Facebook page. If you have yet to join, please look us up. If you search Emerging Mothers on Facebook, of course, you'll find us. And we just give information and we share quotes and videos such as this about just what that's like having teens, of course, leave the home and what that looks like for mothers, if you will. So what I'd like to do is just talk with you all before we jump in. We're going to be talking about just, and we did a poll in our private Facebook group, and that poll asked mothers, what is it that they'd like to know more about? And so mothers mentioned that they'd like to know more about parenting from a distance. Of course, they want to know more about how they can prepare themselves emotionally prior to their teens transition out of the home. And then also they talk just a little bit about how should they go about encouraging their teens. And those are very, very real, very valid, very important, if you will, topics that I'd like to cover, of course, in our segment. And so here it is. We're on, of course, recording in our private Facebook, and then also we're on Instagram as well. And so if you see me looking back and forth, you'll know that, of course, I'm focusing on and making sure that I'm engaged, of course, on both social media platforms. So I want to talk just a little bit about my parenting style and some of what I used and some of what I displayed and as I raised our daughters. You know what? It really started in middle school. That I began to, if you will, prepare my daughters for their next stage in life. Now, we always talked about, of course, after high school, of course, the goal was to go to college. And then after that, I talked a little bit about after college, and then, you want to start your career thereafter. And then, of course, once you're get stable and finding your footing as far as your career journey is concerned, then, typically, and it doesn't always happen, but the next step is, of course, then, of course, marriage and then a family, etc. So we talked about, of course, being a graduate of a university and having those grades. And then making sure that we, then, of course, that whole Greek life while we're in college. I was a part of Greek life, of course. I have a sister who, she entered into the Greek life. And then, of course, my mother's in that Greek world as well. And so we talked about, Greek, and then having the grades. And then, of course, being a graduate. And then thereafter, once you, again, found your footing in that career, then a groom, and then, of course, so we just kind of just, I kind of embraced that, of course, in my parenting style. So in middle school, that's when my hubby and I, we began taking our daughters when they were in middle school to the college campuses. We just wanted to, wanted them to already be able to picture, if you will, themselves on the campus. So, of course, they would be in middle school, and really, I want to be honest, the first time we went was probably when they were like in 5th grade. Took them on a college campus, and then of course 6th, 7th, 8th grade, etc. And we may catch a football game, or we caught, if you will, a basketball game. And then after the basketball game, then of course we would go, and this is us familiarizing them, of course, with that next life after high school. After the game, then of course, we take them and maybe eat in the student union and get our trays and grab a bite to eat and eat there. And then after that, we'd go into the campus library. And then, of course, they'd finish their homework there. And we would do that over the years so they can begin to see themselves on the college campus. And I just believe what you see, that you can be. And, it's all about exposure. I'm sure that you all are familiar with just exposing teens to what it is that they can be. And because if we're in this closed in box, if you will, how is it that we can identify with maybe a certain profession or a certain mode of thinking, really, unless we're exposed. So that started off in middle school, and then that's when we began to, of course, teach them good habits, and they were involved in sports, and that taught great habits as far as leadership and communication and teamwork and being able to lose gracefully and being good sportsmanship. I know I've mentioned it before, but that basketball, that really took them to the next level in reference to their interpersonal skills, if you will. Of course, then also, my daughters are heavily in church, of course, and having a relationship with Christ and waking up and doing their devotionals and attending, camps, church camps with the youth group. And this past weekend, my 9th grader, of course, she participated in something that my older daughters did as well. And that's Now, Disciple Now at our church. The church has a phenomenal youth group and young adult classes, and just, making sure that that our youth at the church are really growing, of course, and having that relationship for the expansion of his kingdom. And so, and then at one point I even started at the church. And I'm just telling you just a little bit about my parenting style, because some of you have reached out and you've asked me, and so I'm just trying to really regurgitate and converse about some things that I did as my daughters were growing up. At one point I started a homeless ministry at our church. So up to about 30 of us were getting on the church bus. And before we did that, maybe the weekend before, we'd have the youth at our church put together some snack packs, whether it was granola bars and some fruit. And of course, there was some literature in there as well. And maybe sometimes I'll have to show you all that picture. But we would have a snack pack, if you will. Maybe there was even, I don't know, some chips in there, maybe like 5 or 6 or 7 different snacks. And then there would be a juice box in there as well with a napkin and all of that. And about 30 of us would get on the church bus, and we would go down up under the Pierce Elevated here in Texas. And we would feed and talk to and love up on the homeless and pray for them, and that's where my daughters really began to really learn what being a servant leader and that whole mode of servanthood. That's when they really began to embrace what that looked like, because they were a part of it. And I'm uncertain about the other volunteers who went down, but when I got back in my car and left scenes such as that, listen, I really felt that they gave to me more than we had even gone down there to give them. Even one time, I was approached by, the pastor of a Chinese church, and they said, we want to partner with you, and we want to go down and we want to feed the homeless as well. And they said, and we'll of course, we'll make lots of chicken fried rice and shrimp fried rice and veggie fried rice, and we'll bring some egg rolls, and we'll bring some fortune cookies and all of that. Listen, when they did that, oh my goodness, there was a whole buffet that was laid out, and it was like, oh my goodness, it just like took my breath away that this church and along with my church, we got together and we were providing this opportunity for the homeless under the Pierce Elevated downtown Houston. And it was like a win-win situation. And I'm just sharing with you just a little bit about my parenting style and how I raised my daughter even before any of them were able to transition out of the home. And I just want to be clear about how we help to model and shape their minds so that would lead them to and help them to be energized and help them to know that college was the next step for them. Because I know a number of you have reached out to me and you've asked me, how did I keep them focused, my daughters? And I'm trying to conjure up some energy so my teen will be ready and able to and focused on launching and leaving the home to go off to college. So it started for me 5th grade and throughout elementary school, of course, going onto the college campus and getting them excited that way, and them seeing other college students and them having their backpacks on their backs and in the library, in the student union, and at the games even before they were even ready, and then helping them to be well-rounded in reference to including church into their lives and praying with them. We pray, and even still today. And my, as you know, 2 of mine have graduated, and so they're young adults. But before I leave the house, I'm laying hands on their head, and I am, of course, praying for them, because it's not promised that any of us will come back into this house. So I always make that a part of our focus, and so that's a part of my parenting style, and so. So that was included, of course, and then it's so interesting, with my husband being in the logistics industry and transporting and picking people up and dropping people off, and then my background being in the investment industry for a Fortune 500 company and then a Fortune 100 company, first as a training officer, training the newly hired investment advisors who came on board for 3 weeks, and of course, the within the Texas region, of course, in the city of Tampa, also in New York. So lives are quite busy, but still keeping our daughters focused was key. I believe now and will always believe that whatever our daughters do, they will be, of course, led by God, because we know that nothing will be too difficult for them, whatever it is they try. So if it's a part of God's will for them, then of course it will come to pass. So just making sure that they're focused on what that big picture is, of course, is critical for us. So what I would like to do, now that I talked about a little bit about myself and my family, and then how we've gone about preparing, of course, our daughters and making sure that they're, of course, focused on what it is that they need to focus on after they've transitioned out of the home. I want to now talk a little bit about how myself as a mother should have. And I have applied strategy to my struggle. I spent so much time preparing my teen, my oldest teen, to transition out of the home. This is where I faltered. And it was all about me preparing, also along with me preparing her. I should have been preparing myself. And so I want you, emerging mothers, I want you to, as you're preparing your teens, please prepare yourself as well, especially from an emotional perspective, because it was when I and my hubby drove our daughter 17 hours away to Blacksburg, Virginia. It was when I returned back home feeling empty, like, okay, so let's stop the presses. Time out. What just happened? It was almost like I was going through the emotions, but there was a disconnect between me going through the emotions and helping her and supporting her and preparing her, but yet not preparing myself. So I want to start off with in this day one workshop. And of course, tomorrow will be day 2 at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. And then Thursday will be day 3. Whereas I want to prepare, I want to help you. And then you know that even after this segment ends, you all are welcome to DM me. And then we set up a discovery call to see how I can maybe hold hand just a little bit more. Or maybe there's an issue that you're facing right now that you want to chat about, and then we have I give specific one-on-one advice on how, of course, that situation or circumstance, of course, can be managed, because we're all dealing with something differently. So I want to start off with, of course, and some of these things, did I do? Absolutely not, but I learned from them. And then of course, I was in the middle of my doctoral studies at the time, and then realized additional things that could have been done around then. So let's talk a little bit about that. First and foremost, when you are preparing yourself emotionally, I would like you to begin to, as you're approaching that day, that transition day that your team will experience, is begin accepting this next stage in their life. You know, a lot of times, again, we're going through the emotions, but we have yet to even accept the fact that they are leaving out of this home. I mean, some of us as mothers, we're wanting to hold on. I saw a cartoon, and I might even put it in our group. And if you have yet to join our private Facebook group, of course, just search Emerging Mothers and you'll find us. And we're in there, and there are, of course, our videos and quotes and all different types of things. A group of other mothers who have teams, who either have or are transitioning out. We're just having some conversations in there. And so, yeah, feel free to join us. But accept, please, that this next stage is quickly coming, number one. And then it will begin to feel as though your team may not need you anymore. And that's a myth. They will most definitely need you. As a matter of fact, there's a video in our private group that talks about the ways in which they will need you. And the ways that they may need you are different than how they need you right now. Because when they land on the college campus or on the military base or simply residential independence, guess what? There are going to be additional advisors coming into their lives. There's going to be other confidants that they will meet. There's going to be all types of divine intervention that's going to take place. So guess what? They're still going to need you. And when you become a part of our private group, and if you have, or if you're new, I know we just had some new mothers join, and I'm super duper excited about that. But nonetheless, there's a video down there that talks about the different ways in which they will need you. And listen to that. And so that way you'll know that, because my daughters, I mean, now they call me and they want to maybe do a trial run, because one of them is getting ready to have an interview when it comes to their taxes, and you know, there's discussion about that. Mom, listen, what's that recipe? Tell me more about that recipe that, of course, you did, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And so then may have to, you know, talk about the recipe or something that we cooked for a holiday. And so they want to do that in their apartment or something along those lines. So you will still be needed. So away with that myth, but just be needed in a different kind of way. So next, I want you to think about, prior to them transitioning out of the home, you know, what are some ways that you can remain close with them? You know, of course, we know there's Skype, there's Zoom, you know, just identifying, you know, what days are we going? I know we can talk throughout the week, but of course, you know, when is it that we can make sure that we connect at least once? Oh, I'm being notified that the sound may be lacking, of course, on our Instagram. And so please let me know. Of course, I did turn it up just a bit, and so let me know if you're able to hear me, and I'm hoping that, of course, that you are. But I'll continue. So find out a way in which you all can remain close. Listen, embrace support. Listen, you're going to have to reach out to your network, those friends that you have, the family members that you have, and maybe someone can go and grab a beverage with you, or maybe do lunch, or maybe your church members. Listen, I held on closely. I pulled my church members even closer. And so there are select ones. They know who they are. I'm reaching out to them and they've experienced this stage in where I am. And so that encouragement, that support, of course, can be, of course, utilized that way. I also want to encourage you, please, to ensure self-care. Listen, there may be some type of, I don't know, a massage, or maybe a mani-pedi, or some facial something, that you can swing out and get and practice that self-care. And then this is what I want to encourage as well. During that time when, of course, they're going to be or preparing to transition out of the home, then you will experience there being some kind of and what I'm going to do is I was just notified that the sound is still lacking on Instagram as well. So I'm going to go out and then I'm going to come back in, just so that I can make sure that everyone is hearing me. So if you'll give me just a moment, I'll be right back on Instagram. And as I'm continuing to talk, of course, then I'll make sure that I am, of course, still sharing some points. So I'll go back in on Instagram. Thank you so much for letting me know that you'd prefer to not miss any of the information. But by the same token, of course, I want to make sure that everyone is hearing me as well. All right. And I am going to swing back into Instagram. Thank you for, again, letting me know that. And if you'll give me just a few moments, then I'll make sure that I am back. Okay. All right. Okay. So I have, of course, come back on Instagram, and I want to continue. Of course, in the same vein in which I was speaking previously. Okay. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to that next point. And that next point I want to share with you all, if you will please make sure when it comes to your teen and that whole anxiety, let's try to, if you will, display that anxiety elsewhere, away from the teen. If you're able to display that anxiety elsewhere, then guess what? Then it will cause your teen to avoid having to carry any additional load at all. And it will allow them to be able to just manage their own emotions, as opposed to having to embrace the emotions and the anxiety you're feeling, and then the emotions and anxiety that they're feeling as well. So they're carrying an extra load, and so that's what we really want to avoid as far as our teens are concerned. Listen, then next, please discover a new hobby. If you discover a new hobby, then guess what? Your attention is redirected. That way you can help your teen. And then also, in addition to helping your teen, of course, you're helping yourself as well. You're focused on something else, as opposed to, have you completed that application? We got to go visit the school. All of those directives that, of course, could cause, of course, teens anxiety and could help them to feel that extra burden. So, and then next, you'll want to relax and you'll want to breathe. And so thank you so much for letting me know. Of course, the sound is good now on Instagram, but you'll want to, as their mother, you'll want to relax, of course, and you'll want to breathe. So please, if you will make sure that you are able to do that, then that would be a win-win situation as your teen is preparing to transition out of the home. So we talked a little bit about, and probably a lot, almost about 15 or almost 20 minutes or so, about how you can prepare yourself emotionally. And you also heard about, just how I was able to prepare myself emotionally. And I even admitted and was so transparent that, you know what, I do all of these things. I did not. I wish I would have had someone telling me, do this, try this. experience this, and then of course there would have been less anxiety on my part. So listen, this is what I like to talk about. Next, I would like to talk about, of course, some ideas, some tips, and some gems in reference to parenting from a distance, of course. And I know, some of you, we've connected in reference to parenting from a distance, but you know what? These are some additional ideas that you can just embrace and put them into your toolbox, and you can practice these as well. Again, and it's so interesting because when I think, and because I talk about this often with parents, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in a group setting, whether there's a meeting, or I sit down and I talk with families about this particular topic. When we think about it, there are a number of ways, and should I say a number of situations where there's this separation as far as families are concerned, and parents, mothers, teens have to deal with that, the distance that's been created between them and their families. And I think about when someone who serves within one of our military branches, when that parent is away, then of course there's that separation. And so, if you have someone in your family who's in the military, maybe some of these tips can be given to them because there's that separation between them and their teen. Or maybe, of course, you are a mother who may be in the trucking business, and you're driving, from state to state, or from this side of the country to that side of North America. And so these are tips that can be utilized in this situation as well. Then also, maybe a parent has taken a position within a company overseas. Then that distance has been created, and so the tips can be used there. Then some of you, I remember our last cruise. It was years ago, and we had gone on a Disney cruise, and here it is. We have, people who are employees of a cruise line. They're away from their teens, or people who are, there may be parents who are incarcerated. All types of ways where parents are separated from their teens. Now, in our situation, of course, we're talking about teens transition out of the home, going, of course, to college or the military base, or simply residential independence. I want us to first and foremost, I want us to give a clean look at our teens, because prior to our teens transitioning out of the home, there's like this separation type of emotion that we will see. I know I saw it with my daughters, whereas they were preparing their minds to leave. And so there could be like some tension that occurs prior to that transition within those last 6 months that they're there in the home, where it may seem as though there's some arguing that's taking place. And it's like, oh my goodness, I just may be ready for them to leave. But that's them thinking through their next steps, and them beginning to separate themselves and come to the realization that their lives are going to change. And so I'd like us to just allow grace during that time, because I know that sure did happen in our home. Whereas, and I'm uncertain if my daughter even realized that that's what was happening, but there was this separation. It could be even anxiety for the teen as well, in reference to them just preparing their minds to leave. There's a lot of decisions that they have to make, and so all of these emotions compiling on top of one another. I was hoping and wanting to help my teen identify what those emotions were, because I'm convinced that when it comes to those different emotions, if you can name it, then you can tame it. And so once we were able to identify what it is that she was going through, then we were able to help her through that. And so that's something that I would really like you as the mother to really embrace prior to that teen transitioning out of the home. The next, of course, I would like to encourage, maybe there's an opportunity to maybe create a website. so that when your teen is gone, then of course all types of pictures and all types of, different family members can of course if you will, enter onto that website, and they can know what's going on with your teen. I know that there's, of course, Facebook, and I know there's, of course, Instagram, and of course, Zoom, and all of those different types of things. But I have known, of course, for family members, if you will, to create a website. And so everyone, is on there. It could be the website that you already have created. I know that in our family, we have a website, and we use it for our family reunion, and we come together in reference to decisions being made there. But by all intents and purposes, that's also used to post pictures and identify where everyone is in their different stage of life. What some families also do, thirdly, is they play games maybe on the weekends, or they engage in conversations, and they foster competitions and those types of things, of course, on their website, or even on Zoom as well. All types of games can be played, and so that have been created for Zoom. And so I would encourage you to keep that communication going, whether it's a website, whether it's, of course, Zoom, whether it's Facebook, or wherever. Communication is critical. And so I would encourage you, of course, to do that. And then also, some people, they're astute on in reference to Dropbox and Viber and those types of things, of course, to remain in touch. It's so important. And then also know that, this is what I'd like you to know. I'd like you to know that when your teen, even prior to them transitioning out of the home, and then the actual transition happens, when they left on the outside of the house, of course, I would encourage you to know that mistakes happen. Mistakes happen when your teen have hit the college campus. And so already prepare your emotions for that. That when a mistake is made, remaining calm as far as our emotions are concerned, and making sure that, of course, we're still embracing our teens and helping them along the way and encouraging them along the way. That is essential and would help to, of course, continue to flourish and nourish that relationship that you have with them. Also, let's be crystal clear about the space that they need. When we are, in this relationship with our teens, and, we may find ourselves thinking that, the more advice I'm able to give them, and the more support and the more help that I'm able to provide, that can really bring that relationship just so close, when in essence, many times, that can cause a teen to take a couple of steps back. Allow some space in that relationship, and allow them to think some things through. Allow them to, of course, rely on and depend on their own decision making, and let's just taper. They know that we have the advice, and as they move forward and ask us for the advice, then of course we can converse, and we can share that with them. But a lot of times we just want to do a whole brain dump, and it's a lot of times it's more than they even ask for. And so let's just allow that space. And then also, let's a lot of times we can pause the pressure. Sometimes, of course, and we may not even know that it's pressure in some of our actions as it pertains to our teens. And so, and again, I'm talking about parenting from a distance. And sometimes I just heard it just the other day, a parent, there was the continuous calling and the continuous checking in, and I just want us to remember that, by golly, that cell phone goes both ways, and that, if they need us, feel free to check in. I'm just asking you to consider, of course, that when they need us, of course, they of course are crystal clear about how to pick up that cell phone. I'd also like this. And I know this is all, we're going on about 35 minutes worth of information, and we're going to conclude here just in a moment, just have just a few more tips to share. I was in a conversation, the other day, and I would encourage us to avoid distributing that guilt card. Okay, from time to time, we have a way of wanting to make sure that we avoid losing our spot in our teens' lives. And one of the ways we think that we can avoid losing that spot is if we continuously ask our teen to come home. Are you coming home this weekend? I'd like to see you during this break. I'm gonna come up there, and we find ourselves going onto the college campus throughout the semester. Just forget parent weekend, only going then, or only going of course to homecoming. By golly, we are there for those moments. We're there for birthdays. We're there to celebrate their friends' birthdays. We're just every weekend we just have lost our lives and we've embraced their lives as a part of ours. And what they're there for. And ultimately that's to graduate. But then enjoy the college life in the process. And to have this holistic experience that of course some of you all have had, and I most definitely had. And I wanted my daughters to do that. And so just I want us to just embrace these tips that are being tossed and these gems that are being dropped. And just a couple of more points up under the umbrella of parenting at a distance. We can write notes in care packages that we send, of course. We can drop some snacks or some beverages or, some lotions. I know, a lot of the daughters love, the body potions and all of that. Just creating a care package and sending that off to them. And then, us listening more than we're talking, you'd be amazed at how that goes a long way. It's just us turning on our listening ears and embracing what it is that they're telling us, and then ending that phone call with "I love you."